I'm joined today by January 6th defendant Peter Schwartz. Uh, Peter and I were good friends inside the DC Gulag after January 6th. We spent the better part of 2 years together. Uh, Pete has spent the last 4 years incarcerated. Since January 6th, he spent about 4 years in jail and prison and has recently been released. The funny thing about his case is that he was actually pardoned technically, but he was actually being held after having been after having won his case on appeal, but he was still kept incarcerated. Pete, thank you for joining me. It's been a long time. The first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about your background so people have a better understanding of who you actually are versus who you've been framed as by the press and by the prosecutors. So could you tell listeners who is the real Pete Schwartz?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tim. Basically, I feel like I'm a fairly average person in America, a blue-collar working man. I grew up in central Illinois and I've moved to Kentucky over a decade ago, so I claim Kentucky as home. But I'm a welder, and off and on throughout the years, I'll work in the shop, or often I take off and do traveling work where I go around from job site to job site on big jobs and, do welding and stuff like that. And that's what I've done in my past. When I was younger, I was pretty wild. Was never really a criminal, but definitely, a wild child. And I have a lot of driving offenses, from just over the years. I'd lost my license and continued to drive back and forth to work and do what I needed to do. And so there was a lot of stuff that they're claiming as criminal offenses that are mostly driving offenses. So there's nothing really serious in there. They're just dramatizing the number and mischaracterizing me. Most of the stuff they were bringing up, a lot of that was 30 years old anyhow. So it's they definitely mischaracterized me, and I understand that they're just trying to do anything they can to paint a picture that like all Trump supporters were bad people or this or that. But anyhow, I would say that the main part of their slander has nothing to do with anything specific. It's just they're like, this guy's a bad guy, and they're not like really delving into any specific, well, at least nothing true. They'll make up all kinds of stuff around it, but they haven't really, they don't really attack the heart of the issue because people it wouldn't have the shock effect they do as to say that this guy's, been in trouble this many times, Well, sure, with driving offenses, that racks a number up pretty good, but at this point, after January 6th, is suddenly seeing stuff on the news that makes me sound horrible. And since being released, and I come back around, people that my family and friends and stuff like that, and just people who know me even fairly casually, like, I was concerned. I thought everybody was going to buy into the slander, but that's really not been the case because, people have known me I'm 51 years old. People that have known me for the majority of my life never really took it to heart what, some slander in the media from people who have never met me are saying. So I am grateful in that sense that at least that I didn't know there is sanity still in this country. And I'm glad that I can witness that personally, because when I was in prison, it was such a different world, and I was so detached from reality. I didn't know what was going on in the world. I knew that things were very different. Things were changing, but I didn't know if, maybe people were started buying into this sort of thing, and that all I see is the media end of it. Well, during prison, all I would see is the media side of the story. And until I got out of prison and I'm back around regular people, now I'm starting to see that the media that we were exposed to in prison is not an accurate representation of the people right now.
Yeah, I don't think it ever is. But Yeah, it is curious, the way people are framed versus the obvious reality once you actually allow them to talk for themselves for even a few moments. Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's safe to say you've been pretty mischaracterized in order for them to push a narrative that you're this hardcore, lifelong criminal. When in reality, as you said, you're pretty much a regular American. You're a traveling welder. And having known you in jail, I know you're a man of faith. You're a loyal person. I and having met you and having known you, it seemed like it was a pretty egregious attempt to do a frame job on you. And I don't know, from your perspective, do you think that I mean, I guess I know the answer, but you would agree that this was basically just a way to ostracize you. You think that they used your background basically because they saw you as an easy target?
Absolutely. I felt like at the time when they started this, well, first off, just as a background statement, I felt that them stealing our country boiled down to three things. I thought that first it was putting the COVID and all the hype and all the mandates and everything that surrounded COVID. That was the first leg of it, which also was the gateway to the next step, which was the stolen 2020 election. And the stolen 2020 election needed a cover-up, and January 6th was where the government enacted the largest government entrapment scheme in the history of our country. And they needed to platform that. They needed to hype that. They needed to keep it in the news. I happened to go there that day, and they saw me, and they're like, "Oh, he has some arrests. He was wearing a flannel." It just like typified how they had been trying to portray all Americans that support Trump as being some type of backwards, redneck, just ignorant people that don't know anything about politics or can't think for themselves. And that was the image they were trying to portray about me, which couldn't be further from the truth. I didn't really feel like I followed Trump. Well, the reason I supported Trump was because I felt like he supported me and my values and the things that I would say, for the most part, most of the population of America believes and supports. Because we are a country of faith. Our country is founded on faith. I myself, I'm a born-again Christian, and that's a big part of my life. And I have yet to see them characterize me as being a Christian when they portray me in the news. And so that's something that it's a little it's disheartening. I wish they would portray me more accurately, but I also know too that not only is it my family and friends who have been supportive and people that know me realize that all that stuff is lies, it's also that the ultimate judge is Jesus Christ. So no matter what they say, it doesn't particularly matter to me.
Since you just touched on this a bit, I want to get into your motivations for actually being in Washington, D.C., because as you said, the framing is criminals, violent insurrectionists, or these ignorant Trump supporters went there en masse to topple democracy. But in reality, there were people there that day to protest COVID lockdowns. There were people there who were just there to hear a speech, like myself. What were the motivations that led to you being in Washington, D.C. itself? Why were you actually in D.C. that day?
Like you, I went there to attend a Trump speech, and there was no planning of anything. I went there, I was married at the time, and I went there with my then wife because, like I said, I travel for work. So at the time, I was working in Pennsylvania, close to Pittsburgh, which was only a 3-hour drive to go see it. I had always wanted to go see a Trump speech, and I just never had the opportunity. In my trade, 60 hours is a pretty average week for me. I just really don't have time to do it. Anytime Trump was giving a speech, I just not happened to be in a different part of the country or whatever, and I just never could coordinate it. And this time, things just lined up, and I knew the speech was going to be historic. But what I really expected when I went down there and I could say that probably a lot of people expected, is we thought we were going to go listen to a speech, and that Trump was going to kind of scold everybody for letting things get out of hand, and the election almost got stolen, and we should be paying closer attention, and that Mike Pence was going to send it for an emergency audit, and I thought that would be the end of it. And I went to go see that historic speech because I thought almost getting an election stolen was history in the making. I didn't realize what was actually going to happen at that point. And we were aware at the time there's a couple of preachers that were supposed to be speaking at the Capitol who we did not end up seeing. But it was Brian Gibson and Greg Locke, and my wife was a fan of those pastors at the time, and although we were expecting to see them, that was like a lesser purpose for us to go. We just thought, well, since we're going to be there, if we can get a chance to catch them, that would be neat as well. And we expected they were going to be down at the Capitol. And of course, by the time we went to the Capitol, something completely different was going on down there.
Mm. Yeah, I also, you mentioned the historic aspect to it. Yeah, from my perspective, it was either going to be, and I didn't want to be naive. I didn't expect politicians to want to do the right thing, but from my perspective, either it was going to be the last public speech that Trump gave as president with his one term, or he would pull a rabbit out of his hat and it would be the beginning of his second term. And I think that's why most people were there that day. And so when you talk about how things actually went down versus what the expectation was, I'd like to go through your actual day on January 6th. If you could, can you take us from start to finish? How did January 6th start, and then take us from there?
We arrived, what I believe to be fairly early, but we had no clue how many people were going to be there. I mean, we knew it would be a big crowd, but we weren't quite prepared. I should have gotten there earlier, because I didn't realize how many people were going to be there and had stayed there and all that. We didn't really have that much planning into it. So when we got there, I believe it was around 9, give or take 9 o'clock in the morning, and I spent a long time just looking for a place to park my car, which was something I had obviously not calculated on, but I ended up finding a spot to park, which was right next to the Capitol. It's the closest public parking spot you could be in to the Capitol on one of the side streets there. So at the time, I was a little upset with the fact that we couldn't get a closer spot to the Ellipse, which is a mile and a half away from where I was parked. So then we had a long walk, and we made it down there, and we went to the speech, and it was it's an event like I'd never attended. It was just there was an aura and air of just happiness and positivity, and people from all different walks of life are talking and getting along. I mean, it was really an incredible experience, and just there's like an energy there, and I hesitate to use the word spiritual, but it felt like almost a spiritual energy, with just everybody motivated in the same direction. And there was not one nefarious vibe that I felt during that entire time of the speech. Before it, leading up to it, I couldn't have even imagined anybody having a riot or anything negative at that point, because during the speech, everybody there is there for the same general interest. I mean, obviously, as conservatives, we all have slightly different ideas because we do think for ourselves, unlike the left and the liberal media, who are a little more sheep-like in their behavior. It felt like everybody there was just positive. I've never experienced anything like it. It was a very happy vibe there in that day. And we didn't really experience, we listened to the speech, and I kind of, as Trump was speaking, I thought he was emphasizing Mike Pence a lot. And still, I guess at this point, I believe that Mike Pence would be on the same page as Trump, And I also believe, too, that, I guess maybe naively, that why would he go against the people's wishes, I mean, because I was thinking he wanted to uphold the people's will and stuff like that. So I was pretty unaware that this was all about to happen the way it happened. And I mean, looking back on it now, I feel a little naive for the way I was thinking, but I mean, that's the state of mind I was in at that time. I really believed that good would prevail. And apparently I was incorrect. So after the speech, we took a long walk down to the Capitol, and a lot of the stuff I've learned after the fact, because I didn't realize that while we're at the speech, there's a bunch of frauds and feds and all kinds of government actors and different various, I don't know, whatever their roles are, but they're all there for the same purpose, and they were down there trying to agitate the police and start a riot and stuff while we're still watching the speech. So by the time we walk down there, I mean, we're still feeling the same, just good aura, and everybody's getting along, and everybody's in a great mood and had a good time. And there's a couple agitators that are like with bullhorns as we're walking down, saying things like, Mike Pence has betrayed everybody and this and that, and he said he's going to go ahead and certify the election even though he believes it's fraudulent. And we were hearing people say stuff like this, and I didn't really believe them. I mean, initially I thought, well, how could they have already got that on the news if if they're just in session right now, And I thought maybe people were just trying to stir the crowd up and stuff. And by the time we walked down to the Capitol, there was definitely a completely different aura in the crowd. And we see all kinds of commotion going on. And so my then wife and I were trying to see what's going on, and we can't see. So she holds her phone up and tries to take a video so we can see over the crowd and see what all the commotion going on up towards the Capitol is. And 59 seconds into her holding this phone up and taking the video, one of those sting ball grenades almost touches her hair as it flies through and hits us, and we have no idea what's going on. And now everybody was in like a panic mode, and they're launching CS gas out into the crowd, which is just brutal. I mean, it really hurts to breathe when even in the open air outside, it's terrible. And the crowd's panicking, and there's still everybody walking from the Trump speech because the crowd is so large that this agitation, you can't really see it until you're up on it. There's just a mass sea of people. They say there was over 1 million there, and I believe that's probably true. I've certainly never seen that many people at one time in one place. And everything's getting more agitated. We're getting pushed to the front. The police aren't really, I suppose they are spraying the munitions and stuff at the people up at the rail. But they're also like launching these percussion grenades and stuff like that, and flashbangs and everything out into the crowd that's behind them, the people who can't even see, which is where we were at. And we got hit the heaviest with all of these attacks where they're just launching, they call them non-lethal munitions, launching them into the crowd at us. And just everybody's getting stirred up, everybody's panicking, and now even some of the people who maybe were not provocateurs are agitated too. They're seeing people get beat up. Everybody's getting maced. And I remember my initial thought being when I, as the attacks started increasing, I look around and so many people who I at the time thought were Trump supporters, I have gas masks on, and I thought, I remember thinking, who thinks to bring a gas mask? You know what I mean? We just went to a speech. Like, I had no idea, and I think that was my first indication that there was something very off with this. Because to my knowledge, at no Trump speech ever before this, there's never been any type of stirring of violence. There's never been any anger and agitation. And after January 6th, to the best of my knowledge, that's never happened again. So for somebody to have expected that there would be some type of agitation at an event where that's never happened before and never happened after, that just really piqued my interest. And that's when I really started delving into this and doing research and trying to learn what really happened to me that day, as I kind of just walked into some type of trap and completely unaware. I had no inkling. I had no planning to be there, so I certainly had no planning to do anything. And clearly other people did. And it was very premeditated.
Right. Well, from what I've heard from others, in terms of the gas masks and the body armor, a lot of that was in preparation for a potential attack by Antifa. So, like, I don't think you were there. So, like, the month before, there were Proud Boys who got, like, stabbed by Antifa. So I think some people went there not wearing that stuff out of malice, but I guess in preparation for an escalation from Antifa.
I guess it's disturbing that when you walk to some place just innocently with no clue, that makes you the victim. Because the government has bigger plans, they have bigger power, there's nothing you can do about it. And the number of people that were involved in this conspiracy, the nefarious people, is still to this day overwhelming me, because I learned new things. For the past 4 years, I've been learning new things about different crazy actions, different pre-planning, the government directly being involved with it, the way they use people, the way they have, so they always like to have plausible deniability. And so as I've gotten to do research and stuff like that, I've learned that, like, a lot of these government agencies that do stuff, like the CIA is obviously notorious for agitating. They do it, been all kinds of instances where the government is playing both sides. And so they take, what they do is they'll take, like, a regular person, and a lot of times they're just junkies or criminals or just very shifty people on the fringe of society, and they use those as contractors. And so, like, they need a job done, they can say, hey, well, you're in trouble here, but we need you to go over here and do this. And which, ironically, later on in the DC jail, after the day and after we'd been there for a while, there was people that came in there, and they admitted that they'd been caught in a drug conspiracy, and that the government was talking to them about doing 15 flat years, and they got in trouble again. So the government told them, well, if you go here to January 6th and you push this insurrection narrative and do a few things to help promote this, then you're going to do a couple years still, but all the other charges go away. And it's confusing to a lot of people, because people are like, well, he can't be a bad guy. They sentenced him to January 6th too, which is a true story, but there's more to the story. And so people that were in this situation, they appear to everybody to be some type of, they're elbowing their way to the front and pretending they're patriot heroes and stuff like that. But a lot of those people were the people who entrapped us. And in my mind, my case was overturned, but even if I had done something, it's certainly nothing on the level of betraying my country and trying to help steal an election and participating in the cover-up and working against innocent American people. To me, I can't imagine a worse crime than that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So not only from your perspective, but also by admission, there were, let's say, agitators, maybe agent provocateurs. There were people there that day trying to incite chaos. I know that we know several of them. The police are overreacting to the agitators, and they're actually attacking innocent people in the crowd. So you'd say this creates sort of a snowball effect, and this is really what turns what would have otherwise been a protest into a full-blown riot, basically. That's actually what the cause is.
Absolutely. And it's even, I read Jack Posobiec's book, The Antifa, and I learned a lot from it, because, before this, I didn't really take it as a serious organization, because they're kind of mocked, for being jobless, live in the basement, pot smoking, weird sexual activity type people, so without jobs, and, the whole stereotypical characterization of Antifa.
Degenerates.
Right. The fringe of society, And so as I read the book, I learned that it's it has a long history. It's way more organized than that, and that a lot of the tactics they use, and I recommend that book to people because it almost reads like a playbook for what happened at January 6th. I mean, they have agitators that go to the front, and they even have peaceful protesters that are still in on the plot. So the agitators will attack and throw frozen water bottles and stuff from behind the peaceful protesters. And then when the cops attack, the peaceful protesters get caught up in it. And then to the non-Antifa crowd, when they start seeing innocent people get attacked, it riles them up. I mean, it's human nature. When you see women and elderly being attacked by the police and being brutalized and stuff like that, whether you were on the Antifa side or not, that you're now upset with them,
Mm.
So it's a evil genius strategy, and it was effective, obviously, because a lot of people who were not Antifa also got riled up and got agitated on that day. And so that's where it gets a blurry line, and it's hard to tell who's who, what's what. Basically, their objectives are to infiltrate, agitate, and retaliate. And so when they do those three things, they have integrated themselves, and they're promoting their cause. And I mean, that's exactly how it went that day. And on that day specifically, what I'm telling you right now is things I've learned later, obviously. But on that day, what did stand out to me as well, besides the gas mask thing, is that there was all kind of leftist chants going on that day. People were doing the "I can't breathe" and "hands up, don't shoot," and the "whose house, our house," and all kinds of different chants that I was like, well, this is highly unusual that a crowd of conservative Trump supporters is doing all these leftist chants and stuff like that. And that stood out in my mind. And as I've learned more about it, as the years have passed after that, and I look back on it, it does make sense now, but not in a good way,
Yeah. Yeah, looking back on it, and, people are weird. So, I mean, when I try to give some benefit of the doubt, they always say never attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. And keep in mind, a lot of these people were coming from all across the country. So I've heard a lot of different perspectives from this point, and I have to take some of it at face value. But it's always interesting seeing different people's perspectives after the fact, because I know that every time I watch video, I see something new that I hadn't seen before. Every time, even from my perspective, because my mindset at the time, I had gone days without sleep. I just gotten off an overnight shift. I was only even able to make it there because I was pounding energy drinks on the drive from DC, or on the drive to DC from Jersey. So I was full of adrenaline on top of it from getting, as you said, the flashbangs thrown. There was just stuff I did not notice at the time. And so I think everybody's perspective that day has to be informed. Well, basically, yeah, I mean, people's understanding needs to be informed by their perspective that day, as well as the evidence that came after the fact. And, we had a lot of time to watch video. We had a lot of time to, really think about how things actually went down. With that, what happens from that point? So you arrived at the on the west side of the building, correct? You were at the West Terrace, I guess.
Right, a little to the north on the west side. That's correct. I believe the same area you were in.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So what happens from that point on? The crowd's getting agitated. People are getting pissed off. The cops are, let's say, at the very best, they're incompetent, possibly malicious. How does the day go on from there?
Well, I have seen, we watched a lot of video together, a lot. So Now I'm far more knowledgeable about it and what the cops were doing. But at that point, at that time on that day, I was not knowledgeable about what the cops were doing because we were never close enough to even really see any cops when we arrived. We're already getting maced. We've been under attack for 20 minutes in this, what they refer to as the police line, where they had the bicycle rack fencing, had collapsed, and we were never close enough to see that. The closest we were at that point was at least 100 feet. I would actually say longer, but I'm being conservative with my estimate. And the crowd was funneling in that way, so we never even actually saw any of the bicycle racks or anything. So by the time we funneled, we're bottlenecked into that area because the police are attacking us and they're shooting the CS gas and people are trying to get away from it, and there's panic and there's chaos and people were going that way, and the crowd moved me that way with them, and they bottlenecked us in. And as I was going, then there's macing us, as everybody's flooding by, the cops are standing there macing people, and as we're going by, I see a duffel bag full of discarded canisters, and I now realize it was planted there. And so I passed some of these out because we need to defend ourselves. And so, just some indiscriminate spraying to try to keep these guys off of us is what I was doing that day. And they bottlenecked us in. And then from that point, there was just complete chaos, and I'm kind of in a heightened state of awareness. I'm not engaged with any police because I'm not close enough to, but I'm also trying to watch the crowd around me too, because I don't know who is doing what or what is going on. This is complete chaos. There's so many people there. There's so much yelling, and there's mace hitting us in the face, and people are screaming, and I can see at this point, now that we're a little closer to it, now I can see different instances of the cops and probably the provocateurs battling and pushing and shoving and punching and mace spraying and gas and shooting off sting ball grenades, and it's almost like a war zone at this point. And I don't imagine, certainly myself has never been, but I don't imagine that the American citizen has ever been in a situation like this, your average American citizen. And I never have either. So it's pretty chaotic, and I guess on that level, it's hard to say what anybody would do in that situation. People are in panic mode. A lot of people are scared for their lives, and they don't even really necessarily know why. It's just so much chaos, and the energy has completely changed from what it was at the Trump speech. Now it's a war zone, and so eventually the crowd leads us up to what's referred to as the tunnel. And now, mind you, I think I got here. I arrived at the Capitol. It was a little after 2:30, and there's just a massive crowd standing up outside the Capitol, and people are singing the anthem, and there's all kinds of people chanting, and it seemed like things had calmed down a little bit at that point, and people were running up to the tunnel and everything, and there's all these people that are there, and they're saying, we need people to go up here, and so they're like, we need men in there, something's happening, right? And they're shoveling everybody up to the tunnel, and everybody's funneled up that direction. We went in there. It was just like a conflict of mace spraying and stuff like that. We went out. We came back out of the tunnel, and we're standing there and trying to get away from it, really. And at this point, the people started breaking windows and stuff like that, and all these people are chanting and yelling, and there's conflict amongst the protesters. And the windows are being busted, and my then wife and I, that's the time we exited the Capitol. We left. Things were we'd already been maced so many times. Our clothes were soaked in mace. We'd been sprayed, shot with sting ball grenades and stuff like that. We were worn out from that. Now they're breaking windows, and we wanted no part of that. So we left and went home. And that was approximately 3:15. So my total time there at the Capitol was actually a little less than 45 minutes, but roughly 45 minutes was the amount of time I spent down at the Capitol that day.
So it's, I mean, it's fair to say not only, I think this is important too, not only were you really, you said you were in a heightened state of awareness. So would it be fair to say, like, your time there was essentially, it was all reactive, not proactive, there,
Absolutely.
yeah, you had yourself to worry about, you saw the crowd getting attacked, but also you had your wife with you as well. So, I mean, from your perspective, were you just defending yourself?
Absolutely. Anything I did with the mace was sheerly just to keep them up off of us. We had been maced and attacked for 20 minutes before I ever had a mace canister in my hand, and that wasn't something I brought with me. That was something that I later on the video saw that was specifically planted there.
And you think, in particular that that was meant for individuals like, say, I don't know, dubious flannel man number 2, that
Right, absolutely. And I, like I said, that day there was so much going on that I didn't see it, but I stepped over these duffel bags of mace, and because I was just walking, and I turned around and I was like, well, what is this? And I reached down to grab it, and I picked it up, and at the time I didn't even notice that there was 2 people who were also like making a beeline for that bag, and they knew it was there. I saw this on video. This is how I learned this part. I'm sure you remember.
Mm.
And as I pick up the bag, these 2 guys that were making a beeline for the bag, they stop when they see that I've picked it up, and they start spinning. One of them starts spinning around, and he starts talking into his shirt collar. And then the 2 go down to the police who are at the corner there, and they're making hand motions to where that bag was before I picked it up. And so, very telling that they obviously were expecting that bag to be there that day. And the guy was, dressed similar to me. It was cold that day, so I had like a flannel-looking type coat on, as did he. And the guy with him was, dressed like a regular person on the street. There was nothing unusual about the way they were dressed, except that they had their faces covered. And I'm positive that this was all part of the plot. And so, even though I don't necessarily think that the police that were defending the Capitol that day, I don't necessarily think that they were in on some big plot as a whole, but there may have been a couple that were working for the wrong side, because it was an officer that planted those duffel bags of mace right there, because on the video you can see that right before the police line breaks, I mean literally a minute before it breaks, they start packing up all the spent munitions and all of their equipment and everything that they had there, and they put it in this box, and he loads up the box, and then he takes the duffel bag out and slides it across the floor there to where it landed, and then packs everything else away. So it was very intentional that got left out, and that's all on video.
Mm. So you're there for a little bit. You're under attack. You're in the tunnel. Things escalate. You got to get your wife out of there. You're in the tunnel as well. I mean, there were a lot of people in the tunnel, seemingly for different reasons. A lot of people were getting crushed in there. You bounce. What happens from that point on? Like, what is going through your mind in the back of your head? I mean, do you think you're invisible? What goes on after you leave the Capitol on January 6th? What's the period like after that before you finally get picked up?
Well, I mean, obviously, I was just stunned at what had just happened, And I mean, there was a lot of people saying all types of different things, and I was just trying to find out from everybody like what happened. And then, of course, the next morning, when I see it on the news, my initial response was, "Well, I don't recognize that event," because I'm seeing all these pictures of these people dressed up like cartoon characters and with Confederate flags and buffalo horns and costumes and military stuff. And where I was at, I just didn't see that. I didn't see. So I thought I was looking at a different event when I saw it. I later learned that a lot of that was staged photo shoots with the people in the costumes and stuff like that. Because I didn't see that going on. So my initial response is, there's something really wrong here, because the footage they're showing is not representative of what I saw that day. It was chaos, no doubt, but it also wasn't what the news was showing, at least to my knowledge.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
So you're, and this is true for me as well. Honestly, I think I got that feeling almost immediately after I had left. I just had sort of a sinking feeling like, ooh, this is, they're going to have a field day with this. So already, like, immediately after, it's kind of a surreal feeling for you. You don't recognize the way that the way that they're framing this event is totally disconnected from your experience, and that seems to be a universal thing. How long after you leave do you start suspecting, if at all, that they're going to come for you? And how do they find you? And how long does that take?
Well, I guess I'm not sure from their end of it how they decided who to arrest first or second or whatever. But it's a lot of hype and stuff. So a lot of discussion from everybody. But oh, you were there, and it wasn't like this. And I can say, well, from my perspective, this, and this is what I saw. I didn't see any of that, and I was trying to collect up information. I realized that this thing was. It was a big event when I was there, but after I left, I realized it was way bigger than I had ever thought. And so obviously that was January 6th, and I went back to work. Everything's fine and stuff, and I got a call from somebody back here in Kentucky, because I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and they said, "Oh, the FBI is poking around. They want to talk to you." And I thought, thought they have questions, and I thought they just wanted to ask me, what I saw or this or that. And certainly wasn't going to seek them out, but I wasn't hiding out from them because I didn't believe I had done anything wrong. I didn't think that there was an arrest warrant for me or anything. I thought they just wanted to question me, and they were going to question everybody who they could find that had been there that day. And I was hearing that on the news and stuff that they're just making mass arrests of everybody that was there. And I thought, well, maybe I was invisible or something, before they had asked to talk to me. And
now, were you turned in by someone? Did they use facial recognition? How exactly did they identify you?
I was never identified by facial recognition or anything. I had a welder helper who was a liberal, and thanks to Trump's economy, he was formerly a restaurant employee who was making $400 a week, and then he went up to where he was making $1,500 a week after taxes, as working for the company I worked for and being a helper. And he got, after the COVID was shutting down all the big jobs and stuff like that, he didn't have work, and I guess he got quite a bit of money for turning me in. So I don't know. He's definitely a liberal and stuff, so I'm not sure what his real motivation was, whether it was the money or just some kind of social justice that he believed in. But he turned me in, and I have the copy of his statement, and oddly enough, his name's Cody Canary, which is kind of comical. And then, maybe it was probably about a year and a half later, they arrested the woman who was my wife at that time, and then she also, in some type of self-preservation, I guess, made some incredible statements. Like, she just tried to tell on everybody about everything that she had ever known in her whole life, because she was trying to save herself, I assume. And so she also made a statement, but it was such a whacked out statement, and it was so conflicting. Even in one statement, she would keep contradicting herself. Like, the FBI didn't even find her statement usable, but it was initially Cody Canary, my welder helper who turned me in initially. So.
Yeah. A lot of people got payouts for turning people in. My roommate got $4,000 to testify against me. So it wouldn't surprise me if money was the motivation there for stabbing a friend in the back, stabbing a coworker in the back, I suppose.
Right. But
all right.
It's unfortunate, but the people we live amongst, not everybody's solid.
That is true. Yep. Coworkers, neighbors, friends. It's I guess that's just where we are as a society now, which is very depressing.
Absolutely. I wasn't really worried about getting arrested. I thought they were going to come harass me a bit and ask me a bunch of questions, and that's really all I expected out of it. And then it was February 2nd, which was right around 3 weeks after the event. I was standing out on the porch with my wife, and 30 of them jump out, and they all have assault rifles, and they threw a flashbang grenade up at us, and then they roll around in the armored personnel carrier with a double-handled machine gun on top, and this is absolutely overwhelming, and they're all screaming at me and telling me to drop the cigarette, which I decided at that point that it's so surreal. I'm just like, no, and I did not drop the cigarette, and they did not shoot me.
Called their bluff.
Yeah, I was like, if they're going to shoot me over a cigarette, then I guess they're going to shoot me,
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I'm angry about it. Like, there's no reason to arrest me. There's certainly no reason to come with 30 people for one guy standing on his porch in his pajamas, And so, of course, they make a big process about it. They intrude on every single thing in my life. They go through every communication I've ever had with anybody. It feels like getting raped, I guess, like that nothing is sacred. Like not that there's anything necessarily illegal in my conversations. It's just not their business, Some of my private conversations, intimate conversations, that I've had with my wife, and, very personal stuff I talk about with my family, and everything, it's the most invasive feeling anybody could imagine. Like, there is nothing. There's stuff I don't remember that they turn up, and it's insane. I mean, it's really violating. I mean, even to this day, that's probably one of the worst parts about it, is how intrusive they've been. And I suppose that the government spies on everybody to a degree anyhow, but just the level of invasiveness is mind-blowing. Like, it just makes me, like, things I wouldn't even thought of because there's nothing illegal. And I'm like, well, now they know, what I think about this and what I think about that. And it's really just none of their business.
Yeah.
And so they arrest me. And during the time that they're arresting me, they have me in handcuffs, and we're not really having any conflict or anything, with the agents and stuff. I basically, of course, I mean, no matter how much I don't like it, I'm just basically staying silent and, just trying to hope it's over as soon as possible, really. And they have me with this large leather belt around my waist that has a big iron ring, and I'm handcuffed with my cuffs through the iron ring, and they tell me, they're like, well, if you need to get you're going to jail, and if you need any phone numbers out of your phone, so you can call people from the jail, we'll let you go ahead and get them out because your phone's going to a different place than you are. And so I said, okay, thank you. And I have a thumbprint to get into my phone, so they hand me the phone, and I'm doing this while I'm cuffed up. And I put my thumb down on the phone and open it, and as soon as I open it, one of the agents shoves me into the wall, and the other one snatches the phone out of my hand. And I said, hey, I do not give you permission to go snooping through my phone. And the agent starts laughing at me, and he says, oh, well, we'll get a warrant. And that struck me odd. He said, well, get a warrant. And, of course, they didn't even have a warrant for my arrest at that point, I later learned. And so they took me off to a jail in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, and they hid me there, and they said, well, you're supposed to get your first hearing like within 24 hours of being arrested. And I said, so we're going to try, but this system doesn't link up. The video system they have here doesn't link up to the federal video system. We don't have the right software. But what they were really doing is they were putting me off until they could go get a warrant. And later in my discovery, when they put the part about what jail I was in, they covered it up because this jail was unaware of what the FBI was doing. So they 3 different times tried to send the records of like the phone calls I made from jail and the arrival time and, just the little statistics about me from that jail. And all 3 times the FBI said that those files were corrupted. They lost the records. They couldn't find them. Basically, they were covering up the fact that they had arrested me without a warrant. So they did get a warrant 2 days later. And on February 4th, they announced to the paper that I was being arrested on February 4th. And it's concerning, but I never got a chance to make that an issue. But that was the start of the violation of all my due process and all my constitutional rights. From day one, I already knew that I had none.
Yeah.
Then they moved me to Butler County, Pennsylvania, and kept me there for, I would say it was a good 3 weeks. And then from Butler County, they moved me to Allegheny County, where I stayed for about a week. Then they moved me to Grady County Jail, which is in Oklahoma City. And from Oklahoma City, they moved me to Northern Neck, Virginia, which is the Northern Neck Jail, which is in Warsaw, Virginia. And then from there, they moved me to the D.C. jail. And obviously, as you know, I was in the D.C. jail for nearly 2.5 years, I would say.
Yeah. Do you remember the date? Do you know when you first arrived to D.C.?
If I'm not mistaken, it was the end of March, beginning of April. I don't remember the specific date off the top of my head. I know I have it in my paperwork somewhere, but
so
2021.
They call it diesel therapy when the marshals, I believe the marshals were the people who were moving you. So the marshals, they bounce people around the country, and usually you pick up a lot of people along the way. Like for me, that's when I met Sable and Curzio. Did you meet any other J6ers while you were being bounced around the country?
Actually, the first one I encountered was as we were leaving Butler County. I met Jordan Mink, and he was the first January 6er that I had met besides myself, and so I liked Jordan a lot, and we kind of bonded because we're the only 2 people in jail for this craziness, and so we were trading stories and stuff like that. And, that was a good experience. It was good to meet Jordan and all that. We had a bond there. Automatically, and not specifically just because of that. I also just like Jordan in general, regardless of the fact that he was there for January 6th. And so me and Jordan decided that we're in a dangerous place and we're going to try to look out for each other, and make sure that we keep each other safe, which was a good decision. And as we left, I think after we left Allegheny County and went to Grady, we picked up Julian Cater, I believe. And then after that, when we went to Northern Neck, we got Tom Webster with us. And then as we were leaving, Shane Jenkins also joined our crew traveling to D.C. And there may have been one other. I think that was it. And that was the crowd that we showed up to the D.C. Gulag with.
Okay, so you all ended up coming together. So it wasn't like some people fell off during the transit.
No, we were collecting them. We weren't losing them.
All aboard. So,
Right.
all right. So you get to DC. How does that work at first? Do you get segregated, or I've talked to a lot of different people. Typically, from what I recall in the beginning, people they came to C2B in waves, and they usually kind of like filtered out of C2A, which was being used as a quarantine pod. Were you in C2A at all?
They did put us in there, and they told us that, because of the COVID at the time, that we had to quarantine there for, I think it was a couple weeks, but I believe it ended up not being quite that long. And they just started us there, and it was, I mean, this is a very remote part of the jail. DC is a huge jail, and I believe it holds 4,000 or 5,000 inmates. And there's parts of the building that are like abandoned, and so this was an abandoned part of the building. I mean, it was in disrepair and stuff, and they put us in a pod, and there's only 5 or 6 of us in this pod at that time, but there's, I can't think, like 45 cells or something like that. So most all the cells are empty. We're just kind of just locked in there all day by ourselves, and we really have no idea what's going on. But still, at this point, I'm like, well, I know they're trying to make this political, but they're probably going to keep us for a couple months. Wait till the news stories die down, and then kick us out. I didn't really expect anything. I still had no idea what situation I was in. My thinking is that if they were going to really politicize this, they might sentence us to 3 months or 6 months or something like that, just to show that they're going to get Trump supporters or stuff. That's I thought was bad at the time, but I had no idea what I was in for. I didn't know that they would later pursue giving me 24 and a half years.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, it was not a few months. You were in DC alone for over 2 years. And so, it begs the question then, what the hell was it like in there? Obviously it's a large span of time, so things had to have changed. But if you could give a little, provide some exposition on what it was like living in DC in the so-called the DC Gulag, if you could.
Well, if I could sum it up in a word, it was a psyop. It was like a psychological operation. Like every part of it, all the way from the isolation and these COs dressed in their paper nurse scrubs and stuff like that, coming around trying to take the temperature, to the actors and agitators and provocateurs who are all coming in there with trying to be leaders and false prophets, and it was bizarro world. I mean, absolute bizarro world. Like I was just screaming to talk to just a regular person who's not trying to brainwash me with something or get me to join a cult or join their militia or like, never in my life have I experienced anything like that. I mean, I'm a welder, but that's construction work. I mean, it's a whole different, more down to earth crowd in my normal life. So going into something like this is just like, I don't even know what's real. I mean, these people they're doing skits, they're having fake fights. I mean, it's just one weird thing after another. On one hand, to temper it a little bit, we're in jail in a city that most of us are not from, and some people are just weird because maybe they're weird anyhow, but they're in a high pressure situation, and sometimes that makes people act oddly. But a lot of it was motivated by nefarious reasons as well. So I had a hard time deciding what's real, what's genuine. I just withdraw and I keep my faith in God. We tried several Bible studies. There was always people who were trying to join the Bible study and subvert its point from just studying the Bible. they would always try to interject like cultic ideas and basically non-biblical stuff into it. And so we had a hard time with these Bible studies and stuff because I won't say most, but some of the people who were joining these Bible studies, their intent was not to study the Bible. And that's just one example of it, but there was a lot of just people trying to control the way you think and stuff like that. And trying to superimpose their ideas over onto you and stuff. So, which ironically, later in trial, even the government tried to do that because I was saddled with two co-defendants who I didn't know. And one of them had said some stuff online, nothing outrageous, but just about taking our country back and, just a little bit of bravado talk or something before January 6th. And then the other co-defendant, who I also didn't know, said all kinds of very crazy things after January 6th. And me, who didn't have all that kind of stuff, when I was in trial, they kind of tried to superimpose the things that they said as being the way I thought, which is not true. I mean, January 6th was a diverse crowd, diverse people, and even though some of the things they said I don't think were wise, they weren't illegal, and they weren't plotting a scheme or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in a First Amendment demonstration, you're going to get people using their First Amendment rights. It's just inevitable.
Right. And, I strongly agree with the First Amendment, and you can say anything you want, but not everything you say is wise, Sure. But that doesn't make it illegal.
Right. Yeah. So, you had hinted at this earlier with the drug conspiracy thing. You had said that there were provocateurs and people were acting and doing all kinds of weird stuff inside the jail. How prevalent was that actually? I was there. I had my perspective. From my perspective, I thought maybe there was about a third of the people in there were solid people, veterans and, blue collar workers, salt of the earth types. Another third were like wishy-washy, didn't want any trouble, but, you didn't really know where you stood. And then another third were Antifa, provocateurs, snitches, junkies, and just weirdos. How do you think that that fleshes out?
I agree with your numbers. I mean, some people, there's a wide variety of ages in there too. So
Sure.
Some of the younger people, they may not have been bad people necessarily, but they were also younger people and just easily influenced, So I think some of the people there were all the provocateurs and the people claiming to be the Messiah and stuff. And so some people just got caught up in that. They're young. They're maybe a little more naive than some of the older guys, And some of them, wavered and they were a little wishy-washy, but I don't necessarily, it wasn't premeditated, nefarious things that they were trying to do.
Mm.
So I agree, but it does seem like when a third of the people who are in there for the wrong reasons, the Antifa and the Fed assets and stuff like that, that's an outrageously high number.
Right.
Because there should have been zero.
Yeah, one is too much. And then when one gets outed, from my perspective, it's like business as usual. Nobody seems to care. This guy's Antifa. Nothing.
That was the oddest thing of all.
Yeah. He's like, hey, this guy was he's the Antifa member that got Ashley Babbitt shot. Well, I don't want to be mean. Well, that's okay. It just, that didn't seem right, especially when you consider, they're your mortal enemy, stuff like that. I don't know. It was very weird. And then it seemed like people someone would get exposed. Maybe somebody like us, we would, we'd bring attention to it, call it out. Everyone would, people would feign anger, and then it would just kind of rotate to somebody else to take the heat off. And then everybody was just supposed to forget everything they just saw, they heard, or they knew. Very odd.
That positively happened, and over and over. And I would like to talk more about it, but here's where I fall into gray areas that you and I both know who these people are that were doing it.
Mm.
And part of where I stand on this now is that I don't feel like I'm certainly not trying to cover for the people who are nefarious and who entrapped me. But I would hate to say a name of somebody if I was incorrect and they were just a strange person or something. So I hesitate on saying the specific names of people who did this, but we definitely know for a fact that a lot of these people are actors and they're not who they say they are. And a lot of them have really elbowed their way to the limelight and just painting themselves as Jan 6 heroes and claiming that they've done a bunch of heroic acts that they did not do. And it's concerning, but
yeah,
hopefully, what my motivation is, for doing interviews like this and really just going forward, anything else I do, if I use up my 15 minutes of fame from this event, what I really want to focus on to the most is that I would like to try to use this little platform here to try to help people understand, be aware of their situation and how we can change it rather than looking back at the past too terribly much.
Yeah, I mean, that's important because, if you consider J6 a giant entrapment scheme, if people aren't aware of the signs to look for, they're just going to keep walking into these kinds of traps. And I'd say that's also true for, the lawfare. If people don't know how the feds went about screwing people over, sabotaging their cases, and on that subject, take us through your trial, because not everybody obviously went to trial. I think initially everybody was gung-ho, yeah, we're going to go to trial, but then eventually, and I'm not, I had different thoughts. I was kind of disappointed, but at the same time, different people had different motivations, different goals. Some people just it seemed to me, people really lost faith in their ability to defend their case. And so most people, I think, by the end started taking plea deals. You did not. You went to trial. Tell me what...
Well, first off, let me start off by saying I went to trial because I thought I was going to be found not guilty and walk out that day.
Well, that's a good reason.
Yeah, that was my motivation. It took nearly a year and a half to get my discovery material and know what they were actually even accusing me of. And so once I got my discovery material and I'm going through it and I'm just like, I think I'm going to win. They're not even lying to say I did stuff I didn't do. I mean, they're just not presenting evidence. So I really believed I was going to win. But I underestimated that it was going to be the jury that was the problem, So I went in with 11 charges, and immediately the jury's a problem, I'd been through a lot of fraudulent lawyers. There's a lot of predators in D.C. who just thought, we're going to milk this January 6th thing for some money, throw them under the bus, and go about our way. And I wasn't up for that, so I ended up going through quite a few lawyers and ended up with some very good ones. And automatically, even during the voir dire, which is the part of the process where you get the jury selection, we already knew that we didn't have a prayer. There was not one Republican. I think there was one Republican, but it was a D.C. Republican, so that doesn't really count,
So a socialist, yeah.
Right. And then as we're picking the jury, people are trying very hard, they're arguing and snipping at each other, trying to get on the jury, which in any other situation, people are making excuses to get off of jury duty.
Right.
So I knew it was going to be a sham. And then by the time we start the trial on day one, I basically have the biggest leftist panel you've ever seen in your life. At the end of day one, I'm there, me and my lawyers, and I had 2 co-defendants, and their lawyers were all there. And we go through the first day of trial, and one of the women in the jury, she sends a text and says that she can't participate because I have a shaved head. So she says the bald guy is giving me the death stare. And so the judge, addresses this, and he says, well, I didn't see it, anything, but we'll be paying attention the next day, So the next day, and I didn't even look at the jury because my lawyers instructed me on courtroom behavior and stuff, and, never even looked over there.
Yeah.
But the second day we go through the whole second day of trial, and at the end of the day, this woman sends a text again, from the jury room saying that he did it again. He was giving me the death stare. I feel uncomfortable and intimidated and stuff like this. And so the judge, he says he didn't see it. He was watching closely, and so was all the people in the courtroom, the marshals. There was nothing, so it was obviously a lie. And he said, well, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to call these jury members in, and because if this woman's been talking like this to the rest of the jury, then the whole jury is tainted. So he starts calling them in one by one, individually. Asked them, did you see a death stare, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, definitely saw a death stare. So everybody that comes in, oh, yeah, there's death stare and stuff. Well, at the end of it, he says, well, I suppose I should have asked them who was given the death stare because I didn't ask that question. So he calls them all back in, and each one of them gives a different answer. One of them says, it's definitely Marcus Malley. It was definitely that guy in the blue suit, Marcus Malley, with the hair there. The next one comes in and says, yeah, it was definitely the bald guy there. I don't know his name. So, clearly they were just hateful from the start. Day 3, so he ended up dismissing that juror. Day 3, my co-defendant's lawyer was not very good, and he was showing just like all of this January 6th footage that had nothing to do with any of us in trial. And like everybody in the courtroom was like, what are we supposed to be seeing here? And like after an hour of watching all this footage, he's like, well, I just want to show you what my client's not doing. And the lawyer reprimanded him pretty hard. And he starts doing it again, and one of the jurors jumps up out of the jury box and takes off out of the room at a run.
What?
And yeah, so
why?
The judge says, I guess we'll take a recess at this time, right? And so he gets a text from the jury room from this woman, and she says, I need an extra 15 minutes to recover from the footage I've seen. It was the footage of that officer that got squished in the door and made the squeaky noise.
Officer Hodges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently that traumatized her so much that she just couldn't come back into the jury room. So, but that's what I was dealing with for a jury. And before the trial, we had excluded 44 witnesses that they tried to put up against me. They didn't know me, didn't know my name, never saw me that day, weren't in the same area as me, but they just wanted to testify that January 6th was the scariest day in their life. And so it was all hype, because not about anything I had done. The point was never to try me. It was to try the day, January 6th, to this jury who, they're very liberal. So, of course, they go for that sort of thing.
Yeah. Innuendo, atrocity propaganda.
Right. And out of all of the officers that testified, which there wasn't that many. It ended up being like 6 or 7 people they had testified by the time we shaved out through all our pretrial motions. Not one of them testified about anything I had done, which that's as crazy as the jury was. I thought, well, surely they're going to recognize this, you know what I mean? And no, they just 100% conviction on every charge for every defendant. I mean, the trial was a sham start to finish. They didn't prove their case. The jury was just thirsty to convict. And they all wanted to, we were hearing the rumors that they were getting book deals so they could talk about which January 6er they convicted and stuff like that. obviously there was some reason they were fighting so hard to get on the jury when most people fight to get off the jury.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's interesting. With regard to the officers, like, I mean, not for nothing, they alleged that, oh, you fought the cops or you attacked the cops or whatever, but these officers never did they ever corroborate that, these officers, or were they just there for show?
No, I was accused of throwing a chair, and the officer who they brought on, they're like, did you get hit by this chair? And he's like, it hit a wall, and it kind of brushed against me, And they're like, well, tell us about your injuries. And he's like, none. And they're like, well, maybe you're not, maybe you didn't have to go to the hospital or something, but did you get any abrasions, or, I mean, is it physical injuries? He's like, nope, not a one. And they said, well, what about the emotional damage this caused? And he said, I'm fine. That's part of my job, And so, like, that was the closest they got to somebody testifying against me. Earlier, like way back at the beginning after I was arrested, they had there's a picture of an arm spraying mace, and they had zoomed in their cameras, which these cameras, they play tricks. They make it look like it's a very close-up event when it's really not, Like, I'm not sure exactly what the trick they do to make it do, but, like, if your hand is here and the officer is 100 feet away, they can make it look like he's half that distance. And that's what they do on this footage. They alter it and they manipulate it to make it look, a little more nefarious than it is. But they zoomed in on these officers that's at the end of this arm spraying mace and interviewed them. And both officers, not just one, but both of them, their statement was that they remembered my face from that day, but they did not remember me committing any crimes or felonies. And so, of course, they didn't bring those officers in because that wasn't the statement they wanted to hear,
Yeah.
But regardless of all this, and everybody in the legal process, certainly the prosecutors, positively my judge, Amit Mehta, if there's anybody that knows that I was not guilty of the charges they brought against me, it's them. Because they're more familiar with the ins and outs of the legal system than anybody. And they knew this, but regardless, the prosecution asked the judge to give me 24 and a half years at sentencing.
And you ended up getting 14, correct?
14 years and 2 months. Yeah, I got 170 months.
What was so there are wild disparities in some of the sentencing with J6ers. Obviously, everybody got over-sentenced. Well, most people got over-sentenced.
Yeah.
What was the logic there? Was this based on the 14 years? I mean, was that based off of sentencing guidelines? Was this Mehta being a dick? What? Well,
the sentencing guidelines that's just smoke and mirrors,
Yeah.
They can put you in any kind of sentencing bracket they want, and justify it. But really, it was even with all of these charges convicted, I should have only been facing 4 years. But they add just like these ridiculous made up enhancements and stuff that somebody could have been injured and add more points. I mean, there's just a long litany of they can adjust this to be whatever they want,
Sure.
And the reason they do that, like, obviously 14 years is an insane sentence. But the reason they do that, they shoot for like 24 and a half years and then sentence me to 14, because what their goal is they're trying to make it where in the appellate court they would say, oh, well, it looks like they cut you a break because you could have got this much.
Right. The judge gave you a deal, basically.
Yeah, so ignoring the fact that they're not considering what the action was, like, okay, well, yeah, they could have also given me no time,
Yeah.
Yes, they didn't, but they didn't consider that option.
Nah, that didn't seem like it, no. So you got sentenced to 14 years, which is absolutely insane. And at the time, before the Oath Keeper and Proud Boy leaders got sentenced. I believe that was that would have been the longest sentence at the time.
At the time, it was.
Yeah. What was going through your mind when you got sentenced?
Well, I was floored. You know what I mean? Because up to this point, it was so surreal and just ridiculous that I just thought it was all for show and that they weren't actually going to do that. I thought, this he's a judge, you know, and he sat through the trial. He knows every bit of the evidence. I thought, surely, even if he's a liberal, I thought he's going to follow the law and do what his job is, you know, which is to, if something unjust has happened, stepping in, because that's literally his job, is to be the referee against the prosecution and defense. And if something unfair has taken place, that's his job, to step in and make sure that something fair does happen. I was mistaken. I was shocked. I was hurt. I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? Complete shock. I'm 51. My parents are elderly. I thought I'd never see them again. You know, it was at that point it all became real, and it was devastating. You know,
yeah.
Like, even thinking back on it, and even though I'm free, it still devastates me. You know,
I can imagine.
And they sent me off to the maximum security penitentiaries, the very worst ones, extremely violent in the United States. I mean, those places are horrible. Like, they have a 3 stabbing per day rule, and then they lock you down for the day, and then you come back out the next day, and they're crazy places, you know. And prison system needs a lot of reform. This is something that I may not really cover here, but I've seen a lot of problems, not just with the January 6th related issues, because one thing I really have learned is that January 6th is, a complete travesty, but the legal system didn't just flip and become that at that time. It's been progressing to that, and at January 6th, since they had political control, they just put it out in the open more. But this has been going on for a long time, and now that I've had a up-close look at the underbelly of the system, I think I'm suited to try to help make some reforms, and that's another goal I'd like to set for myself. There's a lot of innocent people in there suffering, and not just January 6ers. So,
yeah, I think it's opened up a lot of people's eyes especially people who had never actually been in trouble as well, having to go through the federal system after January 6th, going into the prisons and seeing the sheer amount of people who were set up or who had ridiculous conspiracy cases, or, just from being in the jail, not even the prisons, the amount of people who took plea deals. The whole system is built on plea deals. It's built on convictions and not justice.
It's a legal industry.
Yeah. So I think, we agree that, prison reform is especially important. And I guess I would say that judicial reform is especially important, because you actually ended up beating your case, not in trial, but in appeal, and you were still kind of left by the wayside. Could you get into that?
Yeah, I was fairly confident in my appeal. I didn't know. I thought they would take a middle ground on it. So the right decision was to completely reverse all charges. And that's what I got. But I didn't expect that, because I don't think they make right decisions. I think they make, middle of the road decisions. But my worst case scenario on appeal was getting all the enhancements taken off. And basically I would have ended up with time served. I wasn't going to do the 14 years, but they may have said I was, guilty of a lesser thing and then just let me go. But the appellate court can do whatever they want, really. And they reversed and remanded it. So if they just reversed it, the charge goes away and I walk out that day. But on a reverse and a remand, what they do is they're saying, okay, this conviction is overturned, but we're going to kick it down to the lower court to make the dismissal. So that way, basically, I stay in prison until the lower court decides to address it. Well, the appellate court released this decision on January 17th, 3 days before Trump was pardoning everybody. And I wasn't aware of it. My lawyers were happy about it and trying to contact me, but of course, I had almost no communication throughout my imprisonment. So the prison wouldn't let my lawyers talk to me or anything. So on January 20th, I was completely unaware that I had already won my case. And I did get out on the pardons. I heard Trump, I didn't hear Trump say it. I heard a conservative talk show radio host talk about he just signed the pardons for the January 6ers. I heard that at 6 o'clock. I was in Atwater, California. 8 o'clock, they had me pulled out of the cell. And by 10 o'clock, I was standing on the street. So, of course, I was so happy. But I got even happier later when I discovered that I won it, because I always wanted to win my case on the merits. I didn't want to be forgiven for something I didn't do. Although, anyway, they opened that prison door, I was willing to take. So
that's a win. Yeah.
I mean, it's a win. Getting out of that place is a win. It's a terrible place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. They're, well, so you're out now. You're sort of rebuilding. Before we close things out, is there anything else you would like people listening to know? I'm going to give you the floor to basically address anything that you think might not have been addressed.
Well, I think one thing I would like to get people to really pay attention to is how corrupt the media is, and that they've portrayed so many things wrongly that people don't know what to believe. That's why people believe I'm somebody different than I am. That's why they believe different things.
You mean my enforcer?
Right. Ridiculous stuff. So all these lies that get told in the media, people are steadily taking it all in. But I just wish people could understand to learn how to take all this in. And you have to hear all perspectives, because even people that you think you can trust might not be telling you the true story, and maybe not for a nefarious reason. Maybe they just don't have an accurate set of information and they want to put a story out. And that's an easy way for things to get twisted. And so everybody wants stuff in sound bites. It has to be, okay, well, maybe the January 6ers, maybe they're not all bad people, but we only support the nonviolent ones. Well, what people need to remember is that a lot of the people that were charged with violence were either innocent or in self-defense. So that's a whole other aspect that people need to consider when they're playing into these narratives and stuff. And you always have to remember that narratives is not the same as truths, because truths and narratives are different. So I appreciate you taking the time to let me get some of this story out. It's a lot. There's a lot to it. There's still a lot more to come out. I mean, as you know, you and I both know a lot more about this, and it's way more complex, but I think this is a good place to start, starting with these individual stories like this and letting people know just kind of who we are. And, I got dropped into a world that I don't recognize. I've been out, coming up on a month, but I just still, every time I go to the store, I'm in shock. You know what I mean? I'm not back to work yet. The prices are crazy. Just everything's happening very fast, and it's a tough time for me right now. I'm still trying to adjust from coming from a maximum security prison to a world where sometimes people just say hi and they don't want anything from you. They're not trying to harm you, so it's a long, hard adjustment. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Well, absolutely. It's just, it's very important, especially to me, because, a lot of us didn't get this chance when we were locked up. In fact, we were actively targeted if we did try to speak out about the wrongs, or to give the other side of the story. Some actors, some actors were covered nonstop, but the people that I feel who were getting screwed the hardest, and the people who deserved a voice the most, were never given a voice. So I think that it's especially important now that everybody's out now. It's especially important that people hear just how bad it really was, so that it never happens again. I especially want to give a voice to my pal Patriot Pete.
That's right. Well, thank you.
You got it. And I hope we can have more talks in the future.